Hello and welcome, my name is PolishLynx and this is Beauteous, made by a German studio. Let's start it. Another visual novel. It's supposed to disrupt the story of Cinderella in some way. I wonder what way. We'll see it. English. There was once a man who married for the second time to the haughtiest and proudest woman that anyone had ever met. He only had one child, a young girl who was sweet and kind beyond comparison, qualities that she inherited from her late mother, which annoyed her stepmother without even growing weary with it. As soon as the wedding has ended, the vixen had a sudden burst of grumpiness, as she could not bear the qualities of the child, which made her two daughters, who were exactly the same as her, seem even more obnoxious. The more the young girl showed to be someone gracious and understanding, the more the woman felt humiliated and embarrassed. Why? Such perfection burned her face more surely than any mirror, and not being able to stand that, the stepmother instructed the child to do the vilest of chores in the house. She was the one who cleaned the dishes and stairs, rubbed off the cream on the floor of the stepmother and her daughter's bedrooms, so that she scarred her skin. The young girl slept on top of the luxurious residence in a maid's room, subjected to air currents on the most terrible winter evenings and on a wretched straw mattress. In the meanwhile, her stepsisters were heated and auspicious rooms where they had the most expensive four-poster beds and mirrors in which they gazed at themselves in all day long, admiring themselves from head to toe. The poor girl endured all of this in silence with great patience, according to the precepts of her late mother, and didn't dare complain to her father, as she feared that he would scold her because the stepmother had him under her thumb. Once she had finished her chores, she had huddled near the edge of the fireplace, sitting in the cinders, trying to warm herself, which was why in the house she was called Cinderella. However, even with her filthy rags, Cinderella was 100 times more beautiful than her beautifully dressed sisters. One day, the king's son arranged a ball, where he would invite all ladies of quality from near and far. Some say it was his father's idea to hold the ball so the prince could find someone whom he fancied, as the prince was the perfect age to become king, but was acting stubborn and refused to marry. Cinderella's sisters were invited as well, of course, since they had a high reputation in the country. Why they had a high reputation? They were ugly, what you said before. Overjoyed, the two girls quickly began searching for dresses and coiffures which suited them best, which did nothing but pile more work onto Cinderella, since it was she who ironed her sister's clothes. In their house, almost all they spoke of was how they were going to dress. "I'm going to wear my red velvet dress and my necklace from England," proclaimed the eldest sister. "Well, I'm going to wear my usual skirt, but to accent it, I'll be wearing my coat with golden flowers as my diamond barrier, which is not the most indifferent," the younger sister replied. So as to adorn themselves, they called Cinderella for her thoughts on their outfits, as she had great taste. Cinderella did her best to give them her advice, and she even offered to fix their hair for them, and they accepted. The two siblings were so overjoyed that they were almost unable to eat for a whole day, and snapped over 12 laces, trying to tighten their corsets to make their waist look thinner. They were in front of the mirror nearly all day, contemplating themselves over and over again. When the day of the ball came, Cinderella watched them all, her heart heavy, a touch of envy piercing her chest. Her, a girl who had never been able to leave the house, wished that for once, just once, she could see with her own eyes what a ball was, and have her own adventures, like the ones her sisters always bragged about. The moment her sister's carriage disappeared into the distance, she began to sob. The empty house returned her tears in a mournful echo. The fairy godmother, who was passing by to say goodbye, she was leaving to return to her native country, saw her in this state and became quite upset. She was a fairy, as all godmothers were in ancient times, but because men had turned away from magic and didn't believe it anymore, the fairies lost their powers and slowly disappeared into nothingness. Only Cinderella's late mother had continued believing in fairies to perpetuate the custom, but that was not enough to guarantee the existence of the fairy in particular, so she felt like she needed to live, like her sisters before her, in their hidden realm. After seeing Cinderella in tears, she decided that she would allow herself to do one more good deed before leaving, and she asked her what had happened. Ashamed, Cinderella confessed that she wanted nothing but for one night, one sole night, live like her sisters did on a daily basis. Tenderly, her fairy godmother replied, "If that is all, then I shall help you to go. Consider it my departing gift to you." And the fairy godmother thought deeply for a few moments, then declared, "Go to the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Whoa! Cinderella quickly complied, finding the best pumpkin that she could, while wondering how this could help her to go to the ball. The fairy grandmother dug out of insides, only leaving the shell. She then tapped it with her wand. The pumpkin suddenly changed into a beautiful golden carriage. She then told Cinderella to open the mousetrap a little and tapped every mouse that began to escape. The mice then changed into horses, making a fine team of 6 with a beautiful dapple grey coat. For the coach, the fairy godmother then tapped a rat with her wand, changing it into a big coach with one of the finest moustaches that anyone had ever seen. She told Cinderella to fetch her 6 lizards, who had been hiding behind the watering can, then changed them into 6 lackeys. Who then climbed onto the back of the carriage, like that's all they'd done all their lives. Satisfied with her work, the fairy godmother promptly turned to Cinderella. "Perfect, are you happy now? You can go to the ball." "Yeah, but will I really be going in these rags?" As soon as those words left Cinderella's mouth, her fairy godmother tapped her with her wand, and her vile clothing became a golden and silver dress, scented with many jewels. Now on her feet there were glass slippers, the most beautiful pair in the world. Thus adorned, she began to step into her carriage, but as she did, her stepmother warned her that if she stayed at about past 12 o'clock, the spell would be broken, everything would return to normal, her dress into rags, the horses into mice, and her carriage into a pumpkin. Cinderella promised her fairy godmother that she wouldn't forget to leave the ball before midnight, excited and almost jumping for joy. It was a whole new world for her. When she arrived, someone had alerted the king that the princess had arrived that no one seems to recognize, and when she came in the ballroom there was a long silence. The people stopped dancing, and the violinists stopped playing. Everyone was staring at the mysterious unknown beauty that had just walked in. All the women paid attention to her hair and clothes, making preparations in their minds to have something like hers tomorrow, as it would surely be the new trend. Bothered by all the looks she had never received before, Cinderella tried to be discreet, not having expected to be the center of attention. She saw some familiar figures and quickly went to go sit with her sisters to talk. It was the first time she was talking with them equally, which filled her with pleasure. While she was trying to be forgotten from the assistants and to integrate the habits and customs at the place, a young handsome man invited her to dance. The orchestra played what she had requested, a song that her mother taught her when she was a child. A wonderful little melody that you would most likely hear from a music box, light-hearted and playful. After the dance had come to an end, she stood on the balcony all by herself, humming the song again, wanting to engrave this memory in her heart forever. The young man followed her. He was captivated by her beauty, of course, but also because of her unusual behavior. She seems like a dream to him, disconnected from reality, head in the clouds every once in a while, a bit clumsy, calm and reserved, a true daydreamer. The other ladies posed like peacocks, looking for compliments, complaining about the heat, drafts, time, food, everything. But she just stood there and smiled, a soft, mysterious smile on her lips. She sparked his curiosity. He attempted to talk with rigorous politeness, courteous, that she shut down as useless rival. She simply began talking the way she always did, telling him stories and asking questions, hundreds and hundreds of questions. She seemed so odd in the landscape the man had grown up in that he began to feel more and more at ease with her, more at ease than he'd ever been with anyone before. Their conversation was sincere, without lies or any false pretenses. He confesses his desire for freedom, his disgust at the golden cage that was prisoning him, or so he felt. She led him on the path of her dreams, describing worlds she'd created in her mind, and lives that could have been hers. Drowned by her words that made him see thousand wonders, he stepped closer to her. She quivered. Her heart beat loudly in her chest. No one had ever centered all of their attention on her, and she felt both flattered and embarrassed. They both seemed to understand each other, even without saying anything. They could feel something unspeakable in the air, a spark, a blush dry writing lips, longing for something. Cinderella had never been in love before, yet in the darkness of the balcony, under the stars, this feeling appeared obvious to her. It was there, so close. A smile lit up her face as she took her turn to step forward, getting closer, little by little. The mannerism of that time would have wanted a lady to keep her distance, and the young man was surprised by this. What an odd girl. Is she real? Will she disappear if I touch her? Plagued by the influx of conflicting emotions, the sweet joy of no longer feeling alone, and that fear that the other would slowly fade away, the man wanted to ensure her existence, and so he took her in his arms. Cinderella's heart skipped a beat. He felt it as they embraced. She closed her eyes, keeping under her eyelids cold sensations yet unknown. Lost in this nameless immensity, she remained still. Warmth of a distant sky filled all her body. He must have felt the same as he looked at her, forehead to forehead, and stroked her hair. I found you. Her lips touched fleetingly. She would have stayed in the darkness of his bold arms for eternity, if it weren't for reality grabbing at her at the last moment. Cinderella had nearly forgotten what her fairy godmother had warned about, so that she thought it was only 11 o'clock when the first bell rang for 12 o'clock. Unfortunately, time had not stopped for them. Horrified, she shook out of this embrace and fled as lightly as a deer would have done. Her ephemeral lover would have caught her, but she was the fastest, leaving only one of her glass slippers behind, which he, the prince, picked up. Cinderella arrived home breathless, without the carriage, without the horses or lackeys, and without the beautiful dress she'd once worn, but still her eyes sparkled. She had nothing left from her splendor but one of her slippers, the same as the one she dropped. There's no doubt about it, fairy godmother must have left me with a little souvenir to remember that enchanting night, she thought to herself. Thanking her fairy godmother with all her heart, she placed the precious slipper somewhere in her attic, hiding it from the worst of her family. It became her talisman. Henceforth, every night before she went to sleep, she would open the cabinet in which she put the slipper in, and look at it with childish joy, humming her favorite tune, remembering the young man who danced with her once again. It was her little secret, her lucky charm, and thinking of it gave her the strength to surpass all the trials in her way. She never thought she would meet the young man again, and she was content enough with just having met him. He was to remain forever in her heart. A few days after, there were rumors about the great lady that had dropped her glass slipper on the staircase of the castle after the ball, which was picked up the prince. Since then he fell ill, constantly watching the object, and certainly he was deeply in love with the beautiful person who owned the slipper. The prince thought desperately of ways to find the young woman again, then announced shortly after that he would marry whomever fits the slipper.